Hello, everyone. I'm Devi Jags, and this is Sparkle On. Sparkle is your happiness, passion, and self-worth, and that is found through the power of creativity. Today, I'm excited to bring back a regular guest that a few of you have missed, my boyfriend, Thomas Paolini. This is his episode today, guys. He's produced it. He's teeing it up. But we were talking, we go on our morning and nightly walks, and we were talking about how it's so important in partnerships to have your own individual creative outlet. And I think for Tom and I, it's been a journey to figure out what that is apart. Like, obviously, long distance, like we've talked about on the show, that forced us in our own outlets in a lot of ways. But as we've come back together, living together here in LA, it's kind of like ever changing. And like, I think that's what is so interesting about a long relationship too, is like you're not the same people when you've met each other. And so this episode today is kind of to talk about those changes, but most importantly, talk about how having that creative outlet is vital to be the healthiest version of yourself in a relationship. Not that we have all the answers. We definitely don't. But I'd like to think we know a thing or two, being in a relationship for going on 8 years. But also, side note, Tom found Dr. Pepper in the studio. And Dr. Pepper is my favorite soda, except I don't really drink soda. And so today, before this episode, he was like, there's Dr. Pepper in the fridge. And I was like, no, I haven't had it in like 10 years. And I was like, if you open it, I'll have a sip. And no, today we're living life. We're loving life. We are sparkling on because I had one sip of that Dr. Pepper and I was like, I was reverted back to like my 13-year-old self. I was like, oh my God, I love Dr. Pepper. It is still my favorite soda. Are you sitting here trying to hold in? You're laughing at me?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I would say though, you said I was going to tee everything up. You kind of just
I know.
Went with it, and you just sort of said everything that I was going to intro with.
Okay, we can repeat it. I think everyone likes to hear you talk more than me.
No, it's all. I mean, I'll sort of try to frame everything a little bit for our conversation. But I'm glad you led with the Dr. Pepper opener. I was going to go really more for the
hyper. This is why I'm not allowed to have caffeine or sugar.
Well, I was nodding off on the drive here, so I needed something.
Yeah, guys, the LA traffic on the way here was rough.
But you said it before. This is sort of my episode. I thought it would be good to sort of point to the why this is happening now.
Why this episode is happening?
Why I have been given this role here today.
Okay, go ahead, Tom. Take the reins.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
Nope.
Okay. Basically, 2-3 weeks ago, you were doing some astrology charting.
Sounds about right. Sounds like me.
And you were asking about, I don't know, different stuff with career and other things. And there was a revelation that you received about where I fit into, your business journey. Do you remember this? Do you recall this?
I was talking to Claude a little too much. We've hit a couple breaking points here with our life in LA. And we were at that breaking point, and your girl could not afford an astrology reading by her good friends who are astrology readers. And Claude is a pretty good astrology reader.
So basically, I won't go into the astrology elements of it because I'm not an expert and I don't want to speak out of turn. But to summarize what it said, Tom should be in charge.
It kind of did. It said Jupiter's in Leo. Tom is a Leo moon, Leo rising, maybe more Leo than you. or equivalent, which doesn't make any sense. I might have to have another conversation with Claude about that. And yeah, it did say put Tom in charge. Is there internalized misogyny in Claude? That might be a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair.
I mean,
but I was all here for it. I was very invested
made by people
in the feedback. Thank you, Tom. Are we going that direction of like the internalized misogyny of AI? Is that what you prepared today?
No. We'll return to the broadcast as you teed it up before. But no, I wrote down I did my own little cards for today.
Are you asking me questions?
Well, they're more just conversational points for us to sort of touch on.
Okay.
But I was like, oh, she always has her note cards. You sort of like print it and post it.
I know, I'm kind of nervous.
I just wrote it freehand. So I didn't have the time. But to go back to how you started everything, I wrote it down as saying it's a big question and a hot take at the same time. So I guess the hot take element of it would be couples need individual creative outlets or pursuits in order to be better partners within a relationship, better individuals. So basically, to be the best version of yourself in a relationship, you actually need to spend less time with each other and more time alone doing creative things by yourself.
I love spending time alone. Like,
yes.
did we talk about that on the podcast? Like, I need to spend time alone. We've touched on it, yeah. Yeah, you were thrown off by how much alone time I needed when you first moved out
here. When
I
moved here, you realized how much you valued me not being in your space.
Well, I mean, okay, we talk about artists, we talk about creativity, and like Virginia Woolf like has a book, A Room of One's Own. Like, the most ideal scenario, if you can, is having a actual physical space, a studio, a bedroom, or whatever that is your own. And I think, I don't know, there was probably, again, this weird woman's shame that I had of like, oh my God, I want to have alone time. Oh my God, I want to have my own space. Oh my God, sometimes I just want to sleep in my own bed. So we got a king bed. That helped that situation a lot. But yeah, artists need space. But I believe everyone's an artist.
And that's where I was going to go with this, is to say,
you were so insane. We read each other's mind. This is why I don't tell you everything, because you just read my mind.
You believe, and it is your belief, that everyone is creative or an artist in their own way. So in a relationship sense, everyone needs their artistic and creative expression to be realized in order for them to be the best partner they can be. I wrote down a couple questions, and I just have some more, things to consider for us. We can sort of start with like these more broad elements of these questions. We can talk about it from our point of view, because that's really all we can offer. Mm-hmm. Here we are speaking in generalities, but from our own experience. We have our saying, which is, we're not the blueprint, but we like to think that there might be pieces of it within our own relationship that are useful. At least that's what other people tell us, which is why we have these conversations.
Someone asked us to talk about microdosing at some point. Sorry, that was my ADHD going crazy. Well, maybe let us know if you like that.
People tell you to talk about a lot of things.
You're right. Go ahead. Talk about what you want to talk about, Tom.
Well, so the big question portion of built around the hot take here would be, what does separate and individualized creative time and space look like for us?
Well,
like, what does that mean when you say that you need your own? Does it mean literally like something that,
for me, yeah,
is completely detached from not just me, but from like our life together?
Well, for me, I mean, I think we're both kind of figuring out what that cadence and process looks like. I know like the one main tip from The Artist Way by Julia Cameron is going on those weekly artist dates. I don't always go on them weekly, but I do try to have a set aside time each week where I'm just focused in me and not my work, but I would say doing something that I enjoy separate of our relationship. And I think it's hard sometimes because there's so many things that I like to enjoy doing with you, but it's not that it even feels suffocating in the moment. You don't realize it could even be, but like time with people compounds. Other people's feelings, thoughts, emotions, it compounds. And so I think more to answer your question is like, I have learned over time and like trial and error that like, yes, it is vital for me to maybe go to a random concert by myself or go to my favorite tea shop and journal in the garden in the back by myself. And I've studied that about myself. And so, I mean, I even like traveling sometimes by myself, but I think that's a tricky one too, because you've been told that by like a therapist, like, oh, you should take it, like she was telling you, like, oh, Tom, you should take a trip by yourself. Whereas like, if you have the constraint of finances, like we do, like most people do, the option to take a solo trip, it seems counterintuitive to what is a very important part of a relationship is that commitment and enjoyment together and seeing the world together, right? So I think I'd like to do more of that specifically in the future. I think that's really important for me. But most of the time I keep it very like simple and like financially reasonable if I'm going to go do, you know, some sort of like artist date is like what I call it, strictly from like the guided workbook that I follow. But sometimes I'm not just, okay, checking off my weekly artist date. I'm like, I go by my intuition. I go by like what my body says. It's like, if I feel snappy around you or whatever, I know it's probably that I just need alone time and I'm processing something else in my brain that I need space for, because sometimes it's physical space and sometimes it's mental space, and they usually work in tandem with each other.
That was very comprehensive.
Well, you need alone time too. That's why you go to the roof and like work out by yourself.
That's true. So what I wrote to sort of move the conversation further was, and we can answer this conjointly, this is to say, how do we navigate making time and space, not necessarily just for ourselves, but for each other? So what I can say is, obviously, you take your writing classes sometimes, you do, if it is an artist date or something that you plan, or just you go do things on your own. More recently, you've started doing your meditations, other things like that. But if it's just your daily pages or if it's writing in your journal, I literally give you the space to do that. I don't bother you. I go in the other room. Mm-hmm. You know, I remove myself from your space just so you can do those things. Not necessarily like it's inconvenient for me or you're inconveniencing me by doing those things. It's more just, oh, you're like, hey, I'm going to do this just so you know. That way, for whatever I'm doing, if it's, you know, I'm doing work on my computer or if I'm organizing something or getting ready to cook or whatever, just doing daily errands and tasks. You know, that's sort of how I can make time and space for you, is to just literally remove myself from
But
your
I
area.
remove myself too.
True, and you will obviously, on my end, how I create the space for myself. Like when it comes to exercise, I'll go up to the
But
roof.
not just exercise, Tom. What other room is yours? The kitchen.
Oh, I didn't think of that like a room.
Okay, well, technically it's a room.
The kitchen is a room.
Yes.
I guess.
But guys, Tom's kitchen is his kitchen. Like the way his anxiety levels go up when I'm in the kitchen is ridiculous. You guys think I'm crazy? No, you guys don't give me enough credit. That is Tom's kitchen. Yesterday, I asked him if I could help him bake the cookies. What happened?
I said you can put them in the oven.
And I said, I need to bake something. It was on my list to do that because sometimes, cooking helps me. It's not my main creative outlet. Sometimes it causes me more stress than relaxation. But I knew on my list, I like to, every, let's say bi-weekly, cook something. And I was like, well, can I help you? Can we make the cookies together? Blah, blah, blah. You can put them in the oven. Well, that's not baking.
No, that is baking. The baking is when it goes in the oven.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
I was being literal, saying you can bake them.
Oh my goodness. No, Tom did not let me help make the cookies. They were really good though, but that's Tom's
Well, I wanted to make
outlet.
them for you, and I said that. It wasn't that I didn't want your help. I did say you could help.
You guys, but everyone thinks I'm always the one making you go in the kitchen, and you literally said, no, you can't help me make cookies. You did. Because that's your creative outlet, is cooking.
Well, yes. So what I would say is, and I wrote down 2 different points here. So for you, I said, where does Tom fit in? The place I fit in usually is in the kitchen.
Why are you putting it like that?
Well, then for me, I wrote, how do I balance support versus like individual pursuit? So obviously I cook so we have food because we have to eat, believe it or not. But also I enjoy doing that. And I don't necessarily follow a recipe all the time. A lot of times it's just, a flavor or an ingredient that I can just build something around. Now, most of the cooking I do is, generally speaking, with you in mind. Like I'm cooking something because I know you're going to eat it, or you'll have to eat some of it. So I don't just necessarily make something for me. And obviously, we have different dietary restrictions. You have to, watch certain things that I don't necessarily have to do. We're both, vegetarian, but that's.
He copied me. He wasn't always a vegetarian, and I did not make him be a vegetarian. I was actually really against it at first.
I won't have this fight with you on the podcast.
No, let's fight.
But
I thought we were fighting.
No, we're not fighting. Anyway, that's what the individual pursuit looks like for me, is when I go to the kitchen and I'm just making something not for even myself necessarily, but just because I'm like, I need to make something. I'm going to cook it. I can give an example of yesterday. What did you want to eat?
I don't remember. Soup.
The only thing
I always want soup.
You ask for soup.
I always want soup.
I made soup. Well, the soup was simmering.
I would like soup now.
Well, we can have soup later. While the soup was simmering and cooking, I was like, I don't really want soup. But I was also thinking of, I was like, oh, this is a space you were doing something. I had, I did attend to the soup on the stove, lit flame burner. So I can't just leave or do something else. But it was like 20 minutes of like, I could just be on my phone, or I could just waste time, or I could try to cook something just for me, but also in the sense of try to create something. So I was like, you know what? I'll just cook something simply, which was I just cut up some tofu to like just sear on a pan.
Oh yeah.
But I created the creative process for me there was a sauce. I was like, let me make a sauce or something and then figure out how to best apply it and just like have it as a snack. You didn't even see it. I ate it before we even came out to have the soup.
I know he was very excited about this sauce, and he's usually excited about sauce. It's definitely a big part of our creative journey as a couple as it relates to food. And like, I think people think creativity has to be this grand old thing, and it's not, which is kind of why we're breaking it down like this. But Tom's journey into cooking started as kind of a way to we were young. We weren't going out to eat a lot when we met. We didn't really want to. He was trying to impress me, make me food. But I had a much better spice tolerance and a stronger gut back then when I could just eat hot sauce with him. Not to the level that he could. He's crazy. I don't actually, it should be a form of torture, the type of hot sauce that he'll just eat and then act normal about. There's slightly something wrong. But sauce, ironically, is, and I say ironically because my family has made sauces for 30 plus years, but as like a profession, but Tom's like, that's like Tom's thing. But you always say like, cause sometimes I'll get like annoyed. I'm like, oh my God, can I please help? Or like when I decide to cook and like, he's like hovering over me, it's like actually caused arguments. I'm like, hey, I know how to cook too. Not in the way that you do and not maybe as well, but I hold my own in a different style and way. But you always are like, sometimes you're like, I want to cook because it's my outlet. For me, it's a little bit more difficult because there's still so much I'm learning about like heat and random cooking stuff that I don't even know the terminology for. That's how much I'm still learning. But why is cooking your outlet? Like what does it do for you? Because like I feel like you've kind of explained it to me, but not really. Sometimes I just stomp off and I'm like, nah.
Well, I think, and this is sort of where I wanted to, on my card, I wrote things to consider, and these were something you already brought up, but I had before, during, and after in reference to our long distance status. But you said, your question to me was, where does my creative sense sort of come from when it comes to cooking, or like, why is it sort of revolve around cooking? And what I wrote down in the things to consider was, for you, how the space that you exist in, or you existed in as a kid, or that you were brought up in, was one that promoted more independent creativity and exploring things. Mm-hmm. And for me, not that I didn't necessarily have like a loving home or anything like that, but I just had a different experience where one of the only real ways I had to express any sort of interest or creativity that wasn't just playing sports mm-hmm. was like with my mom in the kitchen, or at least like watching cooking shows with her or watching her cook. Yeah. So in a simple way to answer that question, that's where it comes from for me, is I had so much collective experience in the kitchen that wasn't hands-on necessarily, but it built like a body of knowledge and I guess just, for me, like comfortability within those settings, that when I finally had the chance to be like, oh, I'll cook for you, I was like, okay, now I can sort of see if I can actually put these things to use. So for me, that's sort of where all that started from. And especially when, like you were saying, we first got together, we were young, didn't have a whole lot of like, we were in a place where it was like, oh yeah, let's go do this or do that. There was only like a couple of things we could do. And then
drink, have sex, eat.
I just meant like there wasn't a whole lot going on in our area that was like, oh yeah, we need to go try this restaurant or something like that. But yes, but then also COVID was also in that beginning era too. So there was a lot of space for me to be creative in the kitchen and cooking and exploring things. Obviously, you being vegetarian, was a big deal because I wasn't. So I had to learn sort of how to use different ingredients and how to make meals that I might have otherwise made with, simple proteins or whatever. And I had to be like, okay, well, I can't use those. I need to use a different protein or just no protein and use different vegetables or anything else like that to try to sort of either preserve a recipe or just make something entirely new.
I think that was one of the things that made me all giddy inside was like, it wasn't even just like the first guy. It was like the first person that didn't make me being a vegetarian such a big deal. Not that like everyone I was with or dated or whatever made it such a big deal, but it caused like a little bit of a frenzy in guys that I had met, like acting like I was a picky eater. There's a difference between being a picky eater and being a vegetarian. And like also me being a vegetarian because it wasn't just dietary like or anything like that. It was like a values thing. And I think now looking out, looking in from the outside a little bit, like I can see how that was intimidating for some people, not just men, but like just people in general, as far as like I've been a vegetarian since I was 11 for many different reasons that we will not talk about right now. But it was like what I learned from you, or what I watched, I think, and then I realized was like a really important lesson, was the power of constraint in creativity. Was like, you kind of were just like, okay, like she is who she is, which is like kind of like the whole ethos of our relationship and the way we maneuver life together. But you were like, it is what it is. I like a lot of different things. I know how to make a lot of different things that don't use, meat. Whether it might be because like you grew up on an Italian like cooking diet or whatever, but excuse me. That's why I don't drink soda. Like I just remember that pretty vividly when we first started dating. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like this relationship to food really served as our foundation for a lot of our creativity. Because it was like, cause even my family, like we grew up going out to eat a lot cause my mom was a flight attendant. She would go away on weekends and my dad just loved to go out. And so like I had this exposure to all these different cuisines, but also just like the excitement of different menus and stuff like that. Whereas there was still a feeding of like this inner child that I think we were both like in parallel healing. Like you were kind of exploding with kind of like taking these tools that you learned from watching the Food Network, like with your mom, and then applying it to me. Whereas I would say I would give you an idea of like what I would be in the mood to eat, or like, hey, like, can you make this? Like, it was almost like I was a prompt generator of like, here's the challenge for the day. And you go and like do your own thing with it. But like, there was also such a, like, I would just like, I still do it. I don't know why I'm pretending like this is something that doesn't happen anymore, but we'll be in the grocery store and like I get super overwhelmed and I'll just like let you drag me along, and everyone thinks I'm like the bossy, dominant one. And don't tell me I am that person until you go to the grocery store with Thomas Paolini. Okay. I think everyone needs to know that right here, right now. I'm just useless in the grocery store and I just follow him around like a lost puppy.
You don't do that.
I do.
You try to steer. You get really frustrated because you can't find things. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes you can't find anybody to help you. But it comes from the place of you don't have any patience. Unfortunately. No, I'm being serious. Your patience for stuff like that.
I'm a writer. I have some level of patience.
Your patience for things like going to the grocery store, threshold, incredibly low. But that's okay because I have
I have an addiction to productivity, and going to the grocery store does not fall in the list of productivity line items.
You also act like the time it takes to navigate a grocery store, saying like, oh, this is the correct aisle. I don't know. Maybe you would have saved 48 seconds if you knew exactly where the item was, as opposed to just like scanning the shelves, knowing that it's in the aisle.
Listen, if I was the founder of Instacart, it would be a different life that we would lead. That was one of the most genius inventions of all time.
Well,
do you know how much I get done? Instacart should sponsor this show for how much I'm about to like put them on a pedestal. Do you know how much I get done when I use Instacart? A lot.
How much cooking do you get done?
I wait for the groceries from Instacart so I can cook, but Instacart is motivating for me, is very motivating for me to cook. And I actually do cook when the Instacart order comes because I feel like I have to like make that service fee count. But they should cover my service fees because I speak so highly about them.
Okay. No more promotion for Instacart. So thank you for all of that about grocery stores.
You're like acting like Oprah. Okay, now we're done with that part of the segment.
No. To continue on from this, I wanted to sort of go back to what we were saying though, with the before, during, after, long distance, the different framings of how the creativity operates for you specifically, but also for me. Mm-hmm. Navigating our creativity exists within a space that must or requires us to confront something from our past.
Yeah, that was pretty profound.
And that idea, and this is why I think it ties into this broader picture of how in a partnership, in a relationship, in these things, and sort of, understanding the give and take here. In a creative space for you, you're a writer. You write things. A lot of what you write is about stuff and experiences that happened before you knew me. Mm-hmm. And I am still but I am somebody who's supportive of that. And I'm also an outlet for you, not just to talk about it, but to sometimes read things and sort of be like, not an editor, but just like, hey, does this sound good? Do you have any thoughts on this? So you end up bringing me into this creative space with you. And I exist in it in that space. Now, being that I am obviously, we're in a relationship, I'm your partner, some people might see that as like very difficult to bring me in and have me sort of navigate these past feelings with you.
Yes, because they're usually all about other men.
And I know people criticize you for that.
Yeah, it sucks.
But I do think it's an interesting thing, and I do think it is almost, it speaks to why having that independent form of creativity, which is your writing, but still having me be at least involved in it to some degree is important, and how that shifts over time. So when you first started writing, there was a lot of discovery. You didn't necessarily know what you were doing. And it's sort of now come back to this where I am more involved in the creative process, where it's like we talk out these ideas. It's not just you write it and then you sort of either ask me about it or like let me read it. It's like I am more involved in you actually expressing your feelings and us having to sort of dissect these, themes and other things from either the writing that hasn't happened yet or from the writing that's happening in the moment, and then navigate that together. For me, and this is how I think both of these are parallels for the cooking stuff, I always had the innate I wanted to cook type of mentality, and I just didn't have the outlet to do it until you came into the picture. But we did sort of bond over the fact that I was able to make things like really spicy. You had less dietary restrictions and all these things. So as time has shifted, it's been very similar for me, as where even though the cooking is a creative thing that's just for me, or it's my independent thing that I do on my own, where you come into play, obviously, and this has happened since before we were living together, then doing long distance, and now actually living together, where I cook basically everything that you eat, I have to take into consideration all these different things. Now, I said earlier we're vegetarian. We're mostly vegan. At home, we cook vegan. So that's that's different than just being vegetarian. I have to keep those things in mind. Obviously, you've had a lot of dietary stuff with, your stomach not responding well to all sorts of things.
I'm almost 30 and I'm just a girl and my tummy always hurts.
So I have to figure out how to make stuff with even weirder, I shouldn't say weirder ingredients, but more niche ingredients already from like a vegan diet standpoint, like you can't have the soy tofu. We have to get different types of tofu.
Okay, well, that's just like a
Or we
new
can't have-
like stress thing. I feel like I'll eventually come back to tofu.
But it's something that I've had to navigate.
Yeah.
And it bleeds into my creative space.
Yes.
Our relationship. Now, it does not overtake it, but it is important that it influences it and it impacts it, and that it can be still a part of it. So for me, I think being comfortable enough with the relationship that we have to know that I can read that stuff and give you insights on it and not just be defensive or like, I don't care, like do that on your own. It's not about me. And on my end, when it comes to cooking, you can come to me and be like, hey, I have these things. I'm not asking you to eat everything that I eat, but if you want the responsibility of making the food and being creative, could you at least like, you know, sort of follow some of these recipes, which is a lot of what you do. You send me, that's sort of your thing, is you send me reels on Instagram of like, hey, try cooking this, you know, cook these things and all these different, you know, and that's been a journey for us where our individual creative things have sort of shifted over time, not because we've sort of pushed each other to do that, but because in order to be better partners to each other, in order to have a stronger relationship, those creative things, they couldn't disappear, but they did have to sort of shift.
It reminds me of this. Tom mentioned how I've been meditating a lot, and I've learned this technique called TM, and the visual is a visual of the ocean, and like the top are these, you know, these waves. But if you continue deeper and deeper down into the ocean, right, the more you go into the depths, as you would in a meditation, the ocean is still, and it's a foundation for planet Earth or you as a soul and a being. But before we get really woo-woo, at least as it relates to this conversation, is like the waves remind me of our, you know, congruent creative process, and how they're always going up and down in the fluidity of even our partnership. But if you like look into our relationship and its foundation, especially when Tom is reading about all my ex-boyfriends, it's the foundation is still. It's a lot of silence, even though I'm not very silent all the time. Actually, that's not true. Tom yaps like crazy when it's time to go to bed. And, you know, it's hard for me to sleep sometimes. Yap, 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 yap. Don't look at me like that. But what I'm trying to say is I think it's really, if you are trying to be more creative, which I believe is the antidote to well-being, it's really important who you choose to be your partner, because that foundation is going to help those things flourish, whether it's the cooking, whether it's the writing. And I think that's kind of where there's, at some point in the process, I was reading this in a book last night, at some point in your process, I'm not going to pretend like it's easy to like even be in a relationship when you're like going through that tortured artist era. Like, I get it. But there is a sort of acceptance that happens, not just about yourself, but hopefully, if you're lucky enough, with a partner that complements your process as an artist. And I think it's not something that you just like, okay, I know that I need music at this time of day to write, 5,000 words. It's not that formulaic, especially when you're figuring things out with your partner, because there's two people that are always changing for the rest of your life. But we are the ocean, Tom.
Water.
My Pisces king. You're Pisces.
Oh, no. I was thinking of what is that? My sun?
You're a Pisces sun. You're a Leo moon, and you're a Leo rising. So you are water and fire. You are two very important elements of the earth. Two forces of natures that you are, Thomas Paolini.
I'll take it.
A tsunami and a firestorm.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a volcano.
Next question.
I don't know what a firestorm is.
I don't know. I made it up.
So it's not, two forces of nature. Two sort of things I want to sort of come to touch on here at the end, or as we sort of wind down this conversation, would be, in a creative sense, this isn't necessarily a two-parter, but I think it'll sort of go right one into the other. How do we, and you can speak to this better, how does one find or discover, a creative outlet, or sort of pivot from one into the other? So for me, obviously cooking and these things have been something that I like to do. They're more hobbied things. Obviously you need to eat, so it's not just like a hobby to like cook food to eat, but it's more in a creative sense. It's not my job. But as I've sort of explored and I've tried writing down recipes, I've tried doing more creative work of writing things, be it, just journaling, or if it's like writing about the food that I eat, or writing out the recipes for the food that I'm making. I have my idea now that I need to write down, which I have yet to do, for a film or series or whatever it might be.
It's a really good idea, guys.
But
it made my jaw drop.
Writing that out and sort of embracing that creative process of writing and doing the artist's way and stuff like that. So for me, that would be more of a pivot. But if you don't have anything at all, it's sort of, where do you discover? Like, how did you come to, for instance, how did you find writing to be your creative outlet? Like when you sort of came to it before. Now, obviously, I more or less, I think I understand where this comes from, but for listeners' sake, where does your creative outlet come from in terms of being a writer and writing?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of people discover their creative outlet like in the darkest times of their life. And like we know that if you've listened to enough of my episodes, that writing came from a very dark place in my life when there was a severe, desperate time that I had no expression whatsoever. Now, if you can think of a time, and you already answered the question, you don't realize it, but if you can think of another time in your life where you were that vulnerable, sometimes it doesn't feel dark, but when you're that vulnerable and you don't know how to express yourself, think of yourself as a child. Kids throw tantrums because they don't know how to speak. If you watch a 2-year-old, a terrible two's tantrum, they're the most frightening thing on the earth. And that's kind of where at some points of teenagehood or adulthood, people get to that point, right? They might not be actually banging on the floor, or they actually might be. And so it's like finding that creative outlet sometimes becomes like a Hail Mary, and sometimes it's a slow burn. You're cooking at your kitchen, questioning your life. It's different for everyone. But to answer your question, it goes back to the inner child. That's why inner child work is so important across any sort of self-help book that you read, any sort of therapy and counseling that you end up doing. And the thing that I think you and I have been researching a lot lately is how that inner child is suppressed because sometimes people's memory is suppressed, right? And so how does that lack of expression actually impact your ability to know who you are? I think that kids especially are some of the smartest beings on the planet, and we don't give them enough credit. And I think a lot of people are somewhat born kind of innately knowing who they are, or at least having seeds and and signs that show who they are. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe in nurture, right? Like, I think one of the most interesting clips on the internet right now, as we prepare for Gracie Abrams' new album to come out, she's a great songwriter, great singer, daughter of J.J. Abrams, grew up in the entertainment industry, but a lot of the critique of her specifically on the internet is around nepotism. And she points it out in the New York Times, like, that those are totally just and fair comments, right? She talks about how there's a certain, not only permission that she grew up with to be creative, but a vocabulary that she was raised with that a lot of people spend years learning, like myself included. Now, I was still around two very creative parents, whether they attribute themselves to that word or not. You were as well, but people don't recognize certain things or certain routines that are built into their life as creative. So I think step one would be thinking about that inner child life memory that you might have, working in that, then starting to garner some sort of awareness of the things that you already do that are innately creative. Like you said, you cook because we have to eat, right? And then 3 is growing up and granting yourself permission that you can do whatever the fuck you want. And I think that's where you and I feed off of this cycle. Did you doodle in the margins when you were like in school?
No, I went to Catholic school.
That was good, Tom. But
it wasn't a joke.
I know it wasn't a joke. Well, I went to public school and I doodled, and I would draw 3 things. I would draw the little swirlies, right, that go round and round and round like a circle. I would draw the stars that would, you cross them over each other that connect. And then I would draw butterflies. And I actually never thought of it this way. This is not planned, the visual that I'm painting for right now. But the swirlies are representative of that inner child. But it's also representative of that labyrinth of going down the rabbit hole. The Alice in Wonderland story of getting tossed and turned down the tunnel and losing their way into this dream world. And the dream world is really, really important. Don't get me wrong. It's really, really important for a child and adults to dream. The star, however, is my belief, because I see a lot of times on Instagram, everyone's like talking about creativity like it's this swirly, and it is, but at some point, you can't be the tortured artist. At some point, you have to have these connect to flourish, right? To put them out in the world. And I visualize it as a star, because in the way my brain works, call it fucking ADHD if you want. I don't really care what label it is, but these stars connect, and each project has seeds. They might start out as a swirl, and usually they do, because they come from childhood, or they come from some sort of memory. But then when you start honing a process and you start understanding your body's systems, mental, physically, whatever, it becomes like, okay, this movie that I loved so much connects to why I love this book and this song so much. And this lyric of this song is allowing me to write this paragraph that connects me to this other book that I like, but I want it to be exactly like that book. So I study the shit out of this book, and then I go and write the book. And then all of a sudden you bring the line back down, and you have a star. What does that star turn into? It turns into a butterfly that completely transforms your life, and you're flying high, my friend. So those are my little visuals, and I feel like a good aid to at least launch some sort of thought process to get out of that, swirly doodle. that kids just daydream about in the margins. Because when you're doodling in class, you're looking to not be bored. And I was bored a lot in school because nothing interested me until it did.
Until it did. Yeah, I don't know if I would have gone that route there, but you weaved it back in. You did some weaving there.
Do I get a clap? Or you didn't follow?
No, I did. I'm
you
saying
usually follow me.
It came
You
back.
hold your own with following.
The picture manifested by the end. So I like what you said when you were just talking about how, having the space or just being in an environment to allow or feel safe enough to be creative and sort of pursue those things. I think for a lot of people, individually and within relationships, having, like you said, that safety to try to be creative is important. And it's vital. It's vital to be able to go in whatever direction you want to. Now, I think it's a difficult thing to say, oh, yes, creativity looks, I don't want to say mainstream, but it looks traditional. It looks like cooking, pretty normal creative outlet, writing, pretty normal creative outlet. You could throw a bunch of other things in there. Drawing, painting, making music, if that's your thing. What I think is a conversation that is important, not just as the one we're having, but within relationships, and this is why we can talk about it now, is what is the difference and what does it look like between saying this is a creative project versus like this is a hobby or this is for leisure and this is like my outlet. Mm-hmm. Because for you, writing is a part of your business and livelihood. Like you write things that get published, you write things that, turn into other things. You do research and writing, scripts for doing podcasts and stuff like that. You've worked on other projects where you've had to write stuff. You spend money on classes for writing. For me, cooking is a hobby. Mm-hmm. It's not something that I've ever thought about monetizing or making videos to do that stuff. Now, maybe that'd be a good idea. I don't know, but it's not something that I had at the forefront of my mind. So what is sort of the difference between, like for us, because for me, I don't really know what it looks like to have to be creative for, any other reason than just because it's something to do. Whereas for you, it's like writing could be both creative and you could work on a project, but also be like, I have a deadline. I gotta hit this, I gotta get this, piece in so that I can, go out. So I guess when you're when you're in that discovery mode, I guess this is where I would come from. When you're still in the mode of discovering or, finding whatever your outlet is, when do you sort of have to make that decision? Or when did you feel like you needed to make the decision between, spending time on something because it was related to business versus it was like, no, this is just for me. This is something that's just for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty not the best person to answer this because I struggle with quote unquote hobbies, but also at the same time, I think because something was my hobby, it usually inevitably turns into something that maybe gives me, a paycheck, right? I don't entirely at this point rely on writing as my full livelihood. I think I would like to, but I've had to work on a certain acceptance and belief that I could be, right? I think this is a much larger conversation and probably like another episode at some point. But, I had a coach when I was younger, when I was training for cross country and track that, one of the biggest lessons was if you follow your passion fully and execute it fully, everything else will fall into place. And I think the way I understand the creative act to be is sometimes, for example, you don't want to be a chef. Like you've made that very clear. and I believe you. Like, I don't think you want to be a chef, and I see you doing many other things. Sometimes in one area of your life, you have to follow that hobby to the fullest execution that you can, because sometimes, and maybe I'm going to get a little spiritual, but energetically, it brings momentum elsewhere. And you have to let your hobbies, aka creativity, aka your sparkle, surprise you. You know, I've heard things like someone learns how to do a headstand in yoga and their whole life changes. People talk about how they meditate and their whole life changes. People talk about how they picked up running for the first time and ran a marathon. They're not, professional runners, but their whole life changes. And I think it's because the similarity between all the things that I even just listed alone is that someone got in touch with that internal voice. The way Sparkle started was because I didn't have autonomy of my body anymore. Body meaning the physical body and the mental side of my body. And with all the consumption that we have in the day, jobs that we don't like, if people have kids or they're in bad relationships that aren't elevating them, that internal voice and that autonomy goes away. And I don't know what my life would be if I wasn't fighting for that autonomy every day. And I think I was very, very, very lucky because sports did teach me the understanding that inner voice existed, and that trust and stuff in my body was something extremely magical. I learned it at a very, very, very young age. Some people take their whole life to learn that. And part of, to your question and point, is you can't get that unless you follow something that you really love. I think for a long time I asked myself, did I love running? Because there was still the competitive side of me of like, I wanted to beat someone. I wanted to get this medal. There was still a level of accomplishment that I wanted. But there was also a large percent of it was I really did love being able to be connected with myself. And so I don't know the answer to your question specifically. I do know that I don't always enjoy writing when I'm writing a piece that just makes me money. It's miserable and it feels like a form of torture, and it's a balance where you have to carve out writing professionally and you have to carve out writing for your enjoyment or your own process and projects. And I mean, but that's still, you have to separate the project writing too from the writing for enjoyment, because if you're writing to sell something and that's your own personal project, like that's still professional, right? And so when for example, when you're cooking, like I know you don't enjoy it as much, or you get more stressed when like you're cooking for people. Like I see it, right? And so it's finding that balance of how much time you're going to invest in each version of it. But that's why it's also really important. I think of artists as like generators, right? They get charged by something that excites them. And there's sometimes they say artists get bored too easily. They call it ADHD again, or whatever. They call it so many different things. And I think it's not that. It's, at the end of the day, we're all like Peter Pan. We don't actually grow up completely. And that requires a sense of play. And so if you see yourself getting bored from a certain creative hobby, try a new one. Like I really have this desire to it makes me stay up at night. It makes my skin crawl. It's like, I really want to go back to learning how to knit. The problem was the last time I was knitting, I grew an addiction to it. And my roommates had to be like, stop knitting. And so that's just another problem I have to deal with. But I'm not everyone. Not everybody's going to grow an addiction to knitting. But sometimes I think your intuition is telling you, hey, you need a new hobby. There's a reason why. Because knitting will probably fuel something else that I'm trying to work out. Like that's how psyche works. That's how memory works. Like literal muscle memory works. And I only know that because I was an athlete, which is separately a whole nother episode too, is I do believe athletes are some of the most like creative beings. They just haven't understood that about themselves, and they're blah, 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 blah. That's another episode for another day.
I think a lot of what you said was sort of just talking around for you at this point. Writing is obviously where your creativity sort of comes from, but it might not be your main creative outlet anymore. And I do think you haven't had a real chance to sort of, like you were saying, pivot into these other things. But like you were saying with knitting, for some people, sport is that creative outlet.
Yeah, for sure.
So for you, like golf, that could be your new creative outlet.
Well, it has been for sure. Yeah.
And obviously, you haven't played as much golf as you would have liked to in the last
couple
year or
months.
so. But in general, like that is something that is sort of you've transitioned away from, because the writing has been something that's more not just creative, but it is that, it has those business elements. So I think that's really good. I think I'm just beginning my journey in terms of, where my creative things could take me, or like what they might manifest as. I know, this could be another episode of like the stuff with like jewelry.
Oh yeah, Tom loves jewelry.
But the last thing I wrote down of things to consider, and I think this ties everything together that we've talked about. And it's not necessarily about being creative, but it is about how within a partnership, within a relationship, this is something that like is, it's always going to be there. And I'm just going to say it, and then you can take it wherever you want to. But I think somebody else had posted it recently I think on the 4th of July, one of your good old friends. The question is, within a relationship, who should do the laundry?
Definitely Tom.
That's it?
There's nothing else to say. I'm not doing the laundry.
Okay. I thought we could have a little more fun with that. But
what would you like me to have fun about? I hate doing laundry. I don't like doing laundry. I understand the importance of domestic duties, and I do believe in doing domestic duties to help you process certain creative blocks that you might be going through. I believe in the routine that they all fuel one another. Laundry is one. I would like to sit this one out, Coach.
Okay. Who gets the shout out for that?
For the question?
Yeah.
My good friend, Willie Becker. There's only 2 people that are allowed to approve who I marry, and that is my father and Will Becker. Soon to be on the pod. I would love for Will Becker to come on the pod. We should call him on the way home. But yeah, luckily you are in the, as of right now, you're in the good graces of Will Becker. Under my creative direction, I think that there could be space for him here. Oh yeah, apparently now this is now Sparkle On with Thomas Paolini. That's like apparently what we're renaming the show. No, I'm just in charge. It's still you're the talent. I'm just in charge. Okay, well, and you're in charge of the laundry. Someone's got to make my Sparkle outfits look good, and it's not me. Thank you, Devi, for this riveting episode. Thanks, Tom. I'm not in charge of leading us. Signing off. That's still you. All right, everyone. Sparkle on. Thank you, Tom.